and thank you so much for tuning into A Voice for All. I am your host, Jamila Gamble. Always a pleasure having you tuning in. And if you ever want to get in touch with me, make sure you find me at the information below. Website, missjam.ca. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/missjamgamble. And make sure you tweet me at missjampccs as you watch this episode. I love to hear your feedback. And if you ever want to be on A Voice for All, I'm the person to talk to. So make sure you get in touch with me. My first guest tonight is Mark Wafer, the owner of 6, not 1, but 6 Tim Hortons, and I have just been reassured that I could get fresh Nutella pockets anytime I like. But that's not what we're talking about tonight. Mark, welcome to Voice for All.
Thank you. Delighted to be here, Jamila.
Mark, I don't want to say it. I would like for you to say it. Someone's going to look at you and go, okay, he's the owner of 6 Tim Hortons. What is he possibly doing on A Voice for All? And I think part of that is that people don't realize that disabilities could also be invisible as well. So what is your invisible disability?
Well, I was born deaf. I have about 15 to 20% of my hearing, but I was born deaf. I grew up in London, England, moved to Canada when I was 13. But I lip read. I went to regular schools. I did quite well to get out of school without having to learn other forms of language.
Right.
And I did okay.
And with all that accomplishments, you came into business, which is, again, a very big stereotype in our world that people with disabilities shouldn't be working or can't work, let alone own 6 businesses, successful businesses. How did you get into all of this?
Well, I spent most of my life in the automotive business.
Oh.
And at one point, my wife and I decided we were going to buy our own car dealership. And the opportunity came along to buy a Tim Hortons. And really, that's the Canadian dream.
Yes, it is.
It's to buy a Tim Hortons. 21 years ago, we bought our first store. And we've never looked back. We now have 6 stores in Scarborough.
6?
Yeah.
That's incredible. Now, the reason why I invited you on, because obviously you are just, I've heard such amazing things about who you are, but I wanted to focus a lot on disabilities and employment. I've said it in many seasons that people with disabilities are fully capable of working. If not, they're some of the hardest workers I know. Tell us about the people that you employ at your Tim Hortons.
Well, we've hired 130 people with disabilities in 20 years. Every one of those were meaningful and competitively paid positions. And today, 46 out of our 250 employees have a disability. That's not typical.
Yeah.
For any company. We know that the unemployment rate for people with disabilities is massive.
Yes.
70%. 15% of Canadians with a disability. 70% unemployment. You know, consider that we have such a huge untapped talent out there.
Absolutely.
Of people with disabilities, educated.
Absolutely.
Many with post-secondary education, diplomas, MBAs, and they're not employed only because they have a disability.
And that goes for people with developmental disabilities as well.
Every type.
You know,
every
they may
type
not
of disability.
have all those credentials, but they have heart and they have passion and they have that desire.
Well, that's what makes them such great employees. You know, we know that there's a business case for being an inclusive employer. People with disabilities work harder. That's not necessarily fair.
Yes.
But it's the reality. You know, people with disabilities take a lot longer to find a job. And when they do, the job is precious, so they work harder. Productivity is higher. Safety ratings are greater. Absenteeism is lower. And most importantly, especially for my business, is employee turnover is much, much lower. And one of the things that we don't think about with the disability community is because people with disabilities have different problem-solving skills, they create much more innovation in the workplace.
True, true. And I wish that every employer would have a mindset like yours. For anyone who's watching and may be a business owner, what tips and strategies would you have for them when considering hiring a person with a disability?
Well, we want to get away from what we call tokenism, where a company would hire one person with a disability and then go home and feel good about it.
Yes.
We want businesses to look at their operation critically. There is no position in any business that cannot be done by somebody who has some sort of disability.
Yeah.
It's about making the right fit. But it's about making the right fit with anybody you hire for your company.
Absolutely.
You want to make sure they have the skill set, they have the passion, they're capable of doing the job. And if so, then we should be overlooking that disability. Employers are still buying into a series of myths and stereotypes, and misperceptions, and we have to get past that. But the easiest way to hire somebody with a disability is to just say you're going to do it, is to advertise that you have a position and it's open to somebody who has a disability.
Yeah.
Hire them, make mistakes, include them in the conversation. Accommodations, for example, which most people with disabilities don't need. But if they do need an accommodation, include them in that conversation. Right? Being an inclusive employer and hiring people with disabilities in a capacity-driven way is a competitive advantage.
Which not enough people are realizing.
No, not yet.
And you know, we're in 2016. Like you would think by now that people would get it, but they're not kicking in.
Yeah, it is 2016 indeed, and we would think that people, employers are starting to get it.
Yeah.
But to be fair, employers are starting to embrace inclusion, and for the right reasons. There's just not enough companies that are stepping up yet.
Right.
But if you look at Canada's top corporations, quite a few of them are at the forefront of being an inclusive employer. It's just not enough of them yet. And that's why we have such a massive unemployment rate. We've got 450,000 students from the past 5 years with disabilities who have never worked a single day. And 270,000 of those have a post-secondary education. That's a complete waste of talent. Complete waste of talent. Yeah.
It's like Nutella Pockets stale. Delicious, full of potential.
Exactly.
But when left, not as good. I want to talk about accessibility. And not accessibility in terms of a store, but attitudes. Because I think a lot of businesses and people believe that, okay, if a store has a ramp, an accessible door, a working button, and a washroom, they're good to go. But I disagree. I think if your attitude isn't accessible, then I don't care how accessible your business is.
I think ramps and curb cuts and disabled parking spots, that's so 1980s. I mean, that's old school. If companies are still looking at that, they're really need to take stock of what they're doing. Attitude is the greatest barrier. The attitude of employers, the attitude of society. I, for a long time, have thought that the disability community really needs its own civil rights movement.
Oh, yeah.
But I believe that, accessibility is so much more than just an accessible bathroom, right? So if a person who's blind, for example, goes into a restaurant and they can manage to get into the restaurant, can't see the menu board.
True.
Can't read the menu.
True.
So the menu's in Braille. And there's just so much that the retail community can do to make things much more easier. There's 1.9 million Ontarians with a disability. And if you're not thinking about accessibility from an attitudinal point of view, you're losing money.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because they're forgetting that, yes, because somebody has a disability doesn't mean they don't have money in their pockets.
That's right.
They are total customers, but if your attitude sucks, you're not going to get the business.
The disability community in Canada has $45 billion every year of disposable income.
And who would have known that? I certainly didn't.
Yeah, and that's a Bank of Canada stat.
Wow.
Yeah.
But you mentioned the civil movement. What can we do to promote that civil movement for disability rights?
Well, there's a lot of us who we consider advocates. And I think advocacy is very important. But I think in order for us to move the needle a little faster and a little bit more into the disability community, we need to have activism.
Yes.
Right? And it's a balance between advocacy and activism. But if we're going to change the attitude of society, if you look at the way people think about the disability community, we still openly discriminate against people with disability.
Absolutely.
We don't do that openly with any other demographic in Canada. But with the disability community, we all feel so comfortable still doing that.
Yeah.
That's got to change.
And I don't understand it myself.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things I like to say is that you don't have to have a disability or a relative to care about disability issues. It's a human issue.
It is a human issue.
It's a human issue that happens to be a human with a disability.
It is, but there's an interesting fact, and that is 15% of Canadians have a disability. But if you add in the direct family member of those individuals, mom, dad, son, daughter, brother, sister, we're at 53% of the Canadian population.
Astonishing.
Half of Canadians, more than half of Canadians, are directly affected by disability.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But with a stat like that, I still want to emphasize to people, care. You don't need a reason. You don't need do I have a disability? No, I don't have I don't have one. I don't have a relative, but it's something that I have grown to love for the past 15 years. And I would hope with conversations like this that people would get something from it and go, wow, my perspective on things have changed.
People who are not exposed to disability are scared. They're scared of the unknown. And of course, that's what happens in the private sector when we're talking to HR departments. They're scared of what they don't know.
Yeah.
They're scared of what might happen if they have somebody with a disability. And that's where those stereotypes and myths and, misperceptions come in.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You see, in the stereotypes and the myths is exactly what we aim to do here in A Voice for All. We try to break down those barriers as best as we could. We understand we can't get everything, but having influencers like you on the show really puts things into perspective. And you brought so much thinking into my mind that it disappoints me that this interview has to come to an end, because I feel like you and I could just put our feet up on this table and talk for like another 3 hours.
We could sit here for an hour and eat Nutella and drink coffee, and we definitely could talk a lot more.
I'm in. Did you hear that? Coffee and Nutella with our feet up on the table. I want you to see that I just had a conversation with Mark, who happens to have a hearing impairment. And guess what? We had a conversation. So stereotypes like that people assume, oh my goodness, somebody's deaf, I can't communicate with them, is not always the case. And that's what we aim to do in A Voice for All. We aim to educate and to empower. And I thank you, Mark, for being a guest on the show, for bringing such enlightenment. And to employers out there, before you doubt someone's capabilities, just imagine what your business could become if you hire people who have different abilities. This interview is not done yet in A Voice for All. We have one more segment left, and I hope you've enjoyed listening to Mark. And if you've never had a Nutella Pocket, I suggest you visit Mark's, one of 6 locations. In Scarborough, is it?
Thank you, yes, it's Scarborough.
In Scarborough. Voice for All, folks. I'll see you guys after the break, and thank you again, Mark, for being on the show. It was a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
I'll see you guys after. Welcome back to A Voice for All. I'm your host, Jamila Gamble, and if it's your first time tuning into A Voice for All, welcome. Glad to have you. And it's the only show on Rogers TV that proudly promotes disability awareness and education within our community. If you want to get in touch with me, information is below. Facebook.com/Miss Jam Gamble, Twitter @MissJamPCCS, and my website, MissJam.ca. I love to hear from you guys. So part of my show is getting everyone's voices heard, including parents, because I feel we don't talk enough to parents. And I have a very special parent. Hi, Ida.
Hello.
Ida, we're like best friends now. Well, not really. I'm more best friends with your son because he's my squishy. And it's really special to have you on the show to talk not only about him, but about you. Let's begin from when you were a child. Just because there was that one time we talked and you said growing up, you had a fear of disabilities.
I think it was as an adult as well.
As an adult as well.
Yeah.
And then
just didn't know how to behave around people with disabilities.
And what was it exactly?
Discomfort.
Just like, was it talking to them or looking or not knowing?
I just didn't know where to look. Should I help them? Would that offend them?
Right.
What should I do? Should I do nothing? Should I just pretend I don't see them?
And then Caden comes. And then Caden comes. How was life once Caden came? And I want the real raw truth. How was it?
Well, it was flipped upside down. The first year was grieving, like as if somebody passed away. Perfect idea of a perfect child had passed away.
Did you know when you were pregnant? Anything
There was some question about it. So I was sent to see a specialist, and the specialist who had me on an ultrasound for nearly 2 hours with 5 people looking at him, I was sitting there, laying there crying, and he said, "Who sent you here? Your child is fine. Go home."
So first they told you everything was...
Something was wrong.
Something was wrong, and then this person said everything is A-okay.
Yeah, a specialist.
A specialist.
High-risk pregnancy specialist.
God love high-risk specialist. And then when did you discover that something actually was wrong? Was it when he was born, or was it as he was developing?
Well, I just remember him being born, and I could see him crying, and then all of a sudden, just all 4 limbs and his head, everything dropped backwards, and he was rushed into NICU They pretended everything was cool and then ran out with them calling Code Pink.
Code Pink? What's Code Pink?
I guess a child, a newborn in distress.
Wow.
And the next time I saw him, he had all kinds of tubes and wires. I mean, wires even in his belly button or belly cord, like when they cut it off, I couldn't have imagined seeing anything like this. And they still, 4 days later, didn't have any explanation for what just happened.
So where was your mind at this point? Did you feel like you were ready for this, or was this like an opportunity that you're like, if there's an exit sign, like, let me go?
It was like, this is a really bad dream. I just want to wake up. This is a nightmare. What's happening? Things are out of my control.
Yeah.
I can't change what's happening, and things are just slowly unraveling at that point.
So talk us into coming home now.
His breathing was freaking me out. I was sure something was wrong. He was stopping breathing, and it wasn't until he was over 2 that he was diagnosed with severe sleep apnea.
So 2 years you had to go through this.
Sitting there watching him sleep and nudging him to breathe, yeah.
I could only laugh because I'm with him all the time.
He's awake with you,
And
though.
he's awake with me. I can't imagine sitting there. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
What was your mental health like? Because I think that's a big thing for parents, that people don't realize what a parent's mental health, how it changes.
I felt like this is a nightmare. My head's about to explode. I'm exhausted. I'm heartbroken. Everything that you can imagine that would come with death
Yeah.
was happening.
We're describing all these scary moments with Kadic, but we haven't yet told our viewers what is Kadic's diagnosis. Even when people ask me, I'm like, how do I explain this to you? So I'm going to leave it to you to explain what Kadic's.
Well, Kadic is a very complicated little guy. He was born with a rare genetic deletion, missing 37 genes on chromosome 2. We were told initially that they knew what 2 of the genes do, but then second interview with the genetic team, they said only 1. They know about 1 out of the 37. And I thought, what's the big deal? 37 genes. There's almost 1,500 genes on chromosome 2. What's 37 of them missing?
Right.
It's okay.
Right.
Meanwhile, so now this is leap forward into Kadic being 6 months old, me finding out what's happening with the genetic disorder, still not knowing what this could mean for Kadic.
Yeah.
The one thing we did know is that he had really low tone and he had 0 head control. It was like a ball on a string. Whichever way you tilted, it just kind of went.
Yeah. But he's come
a long way.
a long way.
A long way, but still a long way ahead of him.
So okay, let's make the conversation a little bit more happier. 'Cause
Okay.
I feel like it, from the moment I met you, I would describe you as a warrior mom. Just because I feel for a child like Kadic, there's a lot of people who would dig themselves a very deep hole and hide, while you didn't. You built yourself a spaceship, literally, because you build and you create and you study everything. And I've never worked with a parent like that who comes to me to like, let me tell you a few things. You know, usually I work with parents who are like, I don't know what's happening. How has your life changed in terms of knowing about things for your son?
Well, I went from grieving to a warrior and a race against time. My life, I found meaning to my life. I found the meaning to my life became Kadic and enabling him as much as I can while I'm here.
Yeah.
Because he's going to be here a lot longer than I am. He's only 4, and I'm thinking, you know, 20 years from now, who is Kadic going to be? How is Kadic going to be able to speak for himself and stand up for himself?
Yeah. I'm sure one thing that might have crossed your mind, because I've heard other parents say it before, is they never imagined their child going to school, or other people didn't imagine their child going to school. He's in school. How's that been for you?
The occupational therapist, about a year or so, he was about 3 years old. She said, well, you could start thinking about signing him up for school. And I just had a good old laugh and said, who, this guy? He's a baby. He can't sit. He can't stand. He cannot speak. He prefers to lie down. How is this guy going to go to school? And she turned to me and said, he's not a baby. He's
No.
different, but he's definitely not a baby, and this would be good for him. So I took the advice, and I chuckled all the way to school. I went to sign him up.
Literally?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I'm expecting people to turn me down, to say, no, he can't go to school. He's either too young or he looks like a baby. I've got, kids that are half his age turning to their mom and saying, look, baby.
Yeah.
He's not a baby.
Yeah, which is something I deal with on a daily basis. But
Yeah.
I see him in one aspect of how much he's grown. How do you see the changes in him going to school? Even though he's not doing the traditional academics that the rest of his peers are doing, but that exposure, how has that changed him?
It's changed him in a lot of amazing ways. He's become more social.
Yeah.
He's become more sociable. He's not afraid of big crowds like he used to be. He couldn't be around 4 or 5 people talking amongst themselves. Even his birthday parties were overwhelming for him, and he would
Yeah.
have to be removed from the room because that was too much for him to handle. So bringing him to school and having him around all these little kids has been a great big change in his attitude, behavior, abilities, even that, and drive to try more. It's been really
seen
beneficial.
That. I've seen that. Even like the first day of school, for those of you who don't know, I teach Caden during the day. The first day of school, he lasted, 15 minutes?
Yeah, I didn't go
15
far. I
minutes?
think I made it to
No.
the grocery store and back.
No, I think you sat in the parking lot. Let's just be honest. He lasted for 15, 20 minutes, and it was just tears from beginning to end.
Yeah.
And the first month was pretty much
Laps around the school.
laps around the school and tears from beginning to end. And now he has this hearty belly laugh, and he's in a stander, and he's recognizing people's faces. Like
And he smiles at them.
he smiles at people, and he tells other people to go. He doesn't want to talk to them. But it's been so rewarding to see how far he's come. We have about 2 minutes left. What advice would you have for parents who might be in a similar situation like you?
Never give up. Keep advocating for your child, because if you don't, if you crumble and fall apart, there's nobody else to step in for you. You're the person that's gonna pave that way for your child, because they need you to do that.
And besides what your child needs, what about you as a parent and your wellness? What tips
It
for
can be
wellness?
very exhausting. Build a good support team, like I've got you.
For life.
I've got grandma, we've got PSW that we feel comfortable with. Build your team of support that you could entrust your child to, because there are going to be times, and there are times for us, that we just need to step back and give ourselves a timeout. You can't function and be the best for your child if you're overtired. And honestly, I've had nights where I'm lucky if I get 2 or 3 hours of sleep.
I know.
So on those days, you have to take care of yourself. Otherwise, you'll crumble.
Parents' wellness is so vital. And like Ida said, there's nights that she's gotten 2 hours of sleep, and she's rolled in the morning, and she's like, rolled Caden in, and she's like, take him. But she admits that she's tired. And for parents, I want you guys to get that support that you guys need. Do not be afraid to ask for help. And Ida's information's at the bottom of the screen. If you need another parent to connect with, this is definitely the parent to do so. She is very skilled in a lot of areas. And between you and Mark, this has been another fantastic episode of A Voice for All. I hope you took something away absolutely vital from tonight's show. And if you have any questions, feedback, contact me below. I love to hear from you guys. But that is all for this episode. I will catch you guys next week. Stay well, stay together, and have a good one. Good night.